Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. We're your hosts this evening. I am Tobias, and this is Will. Together we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you are all now members, provided you adhere to our philosophy. Ex curiositas scientia. We pledge to learn without prejudice in pursuit of our mutual goal, perpetual noviceship. We admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus we remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens and excites us and makes us hungry for more. Curiosity Club is made merrier by our fellow artisans at Fort George Brewery in Astoria, Oregon. And now let's give a warm round of applause for Amy Dragon and Dave Mendoza of Cascade Pressing.
So I'm sure you guys can tell who's who. Apologies in advance for the Marge Simpson voice. This is about the best I can do. I'm going to stumble through for a little while. But if it goes out, then I'm going to pass the mic. So vinyl records. I'm assuming everybody's here because of an interest in vinyl and or collect, or maybe don't collect and just have an interest. We both work at Cascade Record Pressing. We have different backgrounds. Dave's been a press operator for how many years?
Since 2012.
2012. And my background is, I guess what leads me here predominantly is in audio engineering, specifically mastering and cutting master discs for vinyl. So that's our background. So, vinyl records have been around for a long, long time. The format has changed quite a bit. I'm not going to get really into the history because this isn't really a history lesson. But the format that is at Cascade is 12-inch records, and they're generally 33 1/3 or cut at 45. We do have a 7-inch machine that we just got a hold of a few months ago, but it's not operable yet. Our main format is 12-inch, 33 1/3, 45s. That format became popular commercially in 1948. Columbia is the one that really gets credit for launching it, but there was other companies that dabbled with it for various reasons. Prior to that, most of the records during that time period were used for radio play. They were used in jukeboxes. They were comps of like lots of different artists that were either thematic or not thematic that were on a label or someone who wanted to pay the money to have a record made. It wasn't until the 60s that artists started really leveraging the format and using it to kind of explore their own creative messages in thematic or concept albums. And it's really when artists started, one artist on one album really became popular. And that format stayed popular until the early 2000s. It was really around probably like the 90s and 2000s, really the birth of the CD that kind of put a lot of vinyl companies out of business, and a lot of the companies that support vinyl kind of put them out of business. Most vinyl companies that stayed in business during that time were really subculture type genres, so punk, hardcore, and electronic music really kept some of the pressing plants in business during that time. And then I'm sure, as everybody knows and has experienced and or heard about, there's been a resurgence in vinyl the past 5-6 years, which brings us to Cascade. We opened last year, May of 2015. We got our equipment in February the same year. It landed in Portland, I think December or January, and then we began the process of refurbishing the equipment. The mechanics that we found to work on the equipment none of them had any press experience. They were motorcycle and car mechanics, and one of them had a history growing up on a farm, and so he had some understanding of hydraulic equipment specifically, and the few of us that were on staff at that time got really well acquainted with brake cleaner to clean these pieces of equipment that were just very, very dirty. Our equipment, and Dave's going to talk a little bit more about the equipment specifically, but just the history of the equipment is it came from a plant in Canada called RIPV, Ripfee went out of business. They sold their lot of equipment. We got 6 presses. The rest of the 6 presses went to a plant that just opened in New Jersey. We were really lucky the 6 that we got had been in storage at Ripfee, so they weren't on the main production line. And so we believe that they probably didn't have the wear and tear that some of the lot that went to Jersey had. We were able to restore them pretty quickly, for the most part. And I like to tell this story. I tell this story to tours, Dave. I don't think you've ever heard this story before. Now I'm going to make you real uncomfortable. But so we'd gotten these machines cleaned up. We cleaned all the, we placed the rubber parts. We placed all the copper parts, all the things that would have worn out over time. We had 2 machines that we were getting online first, and then if it worked, because none of us knew what we were doing. We didn't know how to run the machines. We didn't even know if they were going to work if we plugged them in. And we got to a point where we were ready to automate the machines, and we plugged them in, and holy crap, they worked. Like, yes, they work. Now what? Because most of the manuals we had talked about how to repair the machines and get the machines running, but not necessarily how to run them. Enter this guy. This guy shows up pretty much on our doorstep with a briefcase full of records from a plant in Ohio, and kind of says, man, I'm really tired of Ohio. I don't want to live there anymore. Are you guys hiring? And we're like, holy crap, yes. Do you know how to run this machine? And he says, oh, yeah. And he puts his briefcase down and gets in and starts like, well, this has to go like this, and this part's worn out. You have to buy this from here, and this is where you got to get the compound. And immediately we're like, yes, you're hired. Can you please start today? And he came back 2 weeks later. He drove his family out here, and so this is basically a huge reason why we were able to open so quickly, because we would have spent probably March through all of the summer just figuring out how to operate these machines, making tons of mistakes, probably breaking them and having to repair them again. But with David, he was able to come in and just run them. And so we were able to open really fast in May and actually start taking customer orders and putting out really great records right away. So we had a stroke of good fortune. Okay, so steps of making a vinyl record. So this is all front end stuff. All we have at Cascade Record Pressing are presses. We don't have print machines. We don't make jackets. We don't make inserts. We don't make labels. We don't do any of that stuff. We don't cut the master lacquers. That all happens outside of our plant. So and none of this is intuitive, so I'm going to kind of go through the steps bit by bit because it is a little bit convoluted. But the first step in making a vinyl record is for our plant. Some plants do have, it's a one-stop shop. They do everything in-house. There's a big plant in Eastern Europe that has everything. They make their own compound, they make their jackets, they make everything in this little town in Eastern Europe. We don't do that. We just have the record presses. So first step, you just recorded this album. It's an LP, you're super stoked, you want to put it on vinyl. Your first step is you want to get this mastered. And you have 2 choices. You can go to an engineer who's going to do something called a pre-vinyl master, which means that this mastering engineer is going to take your audio file and they're going to do their best guess to figure. They don't have what's called a lathe, so they're going to do their best guess to figure out what that cutting engineer is going to need. Or you can go to a mastering studio that has a lathe in-house, and that mastering engineer will make something called a vinyl master, which is essentially putting your waveform, which looks like this, putting your waveform on a 1 to 2 mil groove that goes in a circle and gets smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes towards your center label. And so there's challenges inherent in doing that. Back in the day when this was the main format, studios, recording engineers, and artists really understood how to sequence an album, and stereo panning wasn't a huge thing during that time. When engineers were trying to make records louder, the reason they were making it louder is because vinyl has a noise floor, and that noise floor is noisy and can be heard depending on the audio program. So when engineers were engineering it, they were trying to make it loud to try to get the level above the noise floor so you didn't hear that vinyl sound. In any case, engineers are, a mastering engineer is going to be trying to get your audio to fit on, this is a lacquer. And this looks terrible, but when you get these new, it looks like glass. And basically, this is a piece of metal that's coated in lacquer paint. This is not that dissimilar from the old 78s, was basically paint on metal or something in between, something flat. Anyway, you get these blank. And this is a lathe. And this is what is used to cut the master audio onto this lacquer. There's lots of different kinds of lathes. Not every mastering studio has them. Some do, some don't. But it's an antiquated piece of equipment. They don't make them anymore. This one is a Neumann VMS 70. The cutter head on this is a ruby. It's a sharpened polished ruby, and that's what's used to cut it. There's a little bit of heat that is applied to the ruby so that it cuts through the lacquer paint more eloquently and is able to represent the audio pathway. So getting your waveform onto a circled disc that gets smaller and smaller and smaller has some considerations. And these are some of the compromises of vinyl, some things to consider. We talked a little bit about the stereo panning. So a groove is basically a V shape, and it's left channel, right channel is basically what the V is. And your stylus traces through the middle of that groove and will read the left-right channel if it is in fact left and right. If in our era, we're used to being able to listen to a digital file or a CD. You don't have to worry. I mean, stereo panning's awesome. It sounds so cool in headphones and super cool on a stereo, but it really sucks to have to cut that into a groove, because that means anything that has more energy in that way means that the grooves have to get wider to accommodate it. It needs more space to represent that energy. And so things like stereo panning, things like bass, things like high frequency, things that are going to kind of stand out in that way, things that we really like about listening to certain types of music, we have to take it all out because the grooves won't allow for it, or it'll cause the grooves to have almost like a bow tie effect, and they crash into each other and become compromised. So that's a consideration. Length of side, again, like if you're doing a digital release or CD, you don't have to, you could put 50 songs on your release and you don't have to think a thing about it. But with this format, you only have a finite amount of space to cut this stuff, and you can't really go beneath 1 mil grooves or it won't plate properly. So you have to keep the length of side pretty low. It really needs to be under 25 minutes per side in order to fit on this thing. And then the level, again, like level is volume. And so if you have anything, and volume is energy, and so if you have more energy that's being pushed out, it will cause the grooves to be wider, and if you don't have enough room for them as it is, the decision of an engineer might be to turn the level down, just turn the whole thing down. So this is a good diagram. This is a compromise that an engineer has to make with your audio programs. Some artists are actually kind of learning about this and making these decisions on their own, and actually orchestrating and organizing their vinyl or their release in a way that has vinyl in mind on the front end. But if not, then your engineer is going to be looking at these things, and that little ball in the middle, whichever direction you move it, the other things have to be compromised. So if you want a longer side, it's going to be so quiet because you can't make it loud. Any bass or high frequency, any panning, cut it all out, and you can have a long side. You can have a 30-minute side, but it's going to be super quiet. You're going to make people putting your record on stand up and have to go turn the volume up. If you want a really loud record, it can't be long, and you can't have a lot of energy, no bass, no high frequency, no stereo panning, but you can have a real loud record. And a real good way to have a loud record is to actually have it be super short. One of my favorite examples that my boss does is he plays a Billy Idol record that is a single cut at 45, and being cut at 45 means that the grooves are wider and the turntable spins a little faster. So he plays that one and you don't touch the volume at all, and then he puts a really long interpol record on, and the level meters just go like right down because it's super quiet. It's a longer record, beautiful, it sounds great, but it's just not as loud as if you just have one song taking up all that space. You can make it so loud. Okay. Yeah, so like I said, people are becoming more savvy about this format. It's novel. Artists are kind of learning that if they kind of plan for those compromises on the front end, if they don't make their record really long, if they maybe drop a couple songs off of their vinyl release so that they can, you know, kind of keep that ball more in the middle instead of moving it to one of those edges of the triangle. They are tending to be happier with their vinyl releases. I think a lot of artists were pretty surprised when and some still are, who make their first vinyl record, they get it back and they're like, whoa, that sounds so different from my digital release or my CD. And they're not used to hearing their audio having all that bass and high frequency taken out. People talk about the warmth of vinyl, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that those frequencies get EQ'd out. It's a much more mid-range format, which is very pleasing to the human ear. I think that's why some people prefer it. But if you don't consider it on the front end, the engineer is going to take it out on their end, and it can be a little shocking. So this is so once your mastering engineer cuts these master lacquers, they send them to an electroforming facility. There's electroforming facilities that are specific to vinyl, but electroforming happens for jewelry. It's basically plating something in metal. And these lacquers go on to get plated. I don't have the master, they call the master a mother. Basically, it's just turning this into a negative. It's preserving this lacquer. What comes to us are these stampers. So they're metal parts. This is what we put in our machines. This is basically when the job is workable on our end. These stampers come to us, and our press engineers, our press ops put them in our machines, and these are mechanical parts at that point. And we use these to then press the test pressings that go out to customers and get pressed on regular old vinyl. And this gives the customers an opportunity, really for the first time, to hear their audio program on vinyl. Vinyl is like another instrument to your music too. I mean, it adds a vinyl noise floor, it adds warmth, it adds a different quality, and so that's what test pressings are for. So this is Dave. Dave's going to talk a little bit about the actual machines, the automation of the machines, and how records are actually made.
Let's get a round of applause for Amy for that long monotone rant. So I'm Dave Mendoza. I cut my teeth in Cleveland at Gotta Groove Records. I worked there from 2012 to 2015. Came over here in 2015 in May, started working here. So yeah, this is wax cylinder. This is what they used to do in, I think like 1880 to 1901. Yeah, I don't really got anything that I want to say right away. These are presses. That's where I install the stampers. That's a biscuit that you see right there in the middle. What I do is I clean the stampers. I'll install the upper one first, then the lower one. Get a biscuit in there, press it. There's Mark Takaichi, he's joining us tonight. Those are all our machines. We have 6 machines right now, 1 7-inch double press. We have 4 running currently, working on a 5th and working on a 6th. This is all our compound that we use. Virgin material, regrind, all the color material we use. We can make up to 2,000 records a day in an 8-hour shift. We usually run a little longer, try to make 3,000 a day. Labels and biscuits. We have some labels right here. So what actually happens is labels are not glued to records. They're pressed with over 10 tons of pressure on the A and the B side. That's me, Mark, and Josh. That was the first machine we started running back in May. That's our extruder. So I'll put the material in the hopper right there. It'll go through the extruder at 250 degrees. It'll form that biscuit.
And so the hopper is the big triangle.
The bucket-looking thing with the 11 on it. So that little tube right there is all heated. It has a screw that goes through it, pushes the material forward, has a little cup in the automation, forms it in the shape of that biscuit, and it'll bring it forward, drop it on the A and B stamper, drop it right there. Thanks. This is what I control the machine with. Those dials right there control steam, water, and that's pretty much it. That's all it is. It's steam, water, air, and hydraulics. It's all it takes to make a record. I know it sounds simple, but it's a hard process to do, and it's super irritating at times. But I think at the end of the day, I really enjoy what I do, and I'm glad to be pressing records. A little more information about me. So I used to work construction. My background is all construction. I started as a carpenter, went to pipe fitting, did millwright, and then eventually ended up on a survey crew. And I don't know, I was going through a period in life where I was just like, man, what am I gonna do with my life? I don't wanna work construction. It's a bummer. I hated the hours, I hated everything about it. So ever since I was like 15, I was collecting vinyl records. So I said to myself, well, let's see, what can you do in the music industry that doesn't involve music? So I'm like, I'm good with my hands. I have a working history. Let me look into the manufacturing process a little bit. So I got involved with a forum. It's called Secret Society of Late Trolls. You can look it up. They give a lot of pressing information out there. And I started looking up into the pressing process and like emailing people like, hey, I think I could do this. I want to do this. So eventually one day I made about 15 copies of my resume and sent them to every plant in the United States. And one guy in LA wanted me to go out there and do it for free. So I had my flight all set up and I was ready to go to LA, and then like a few days before my flight, Vince Sluzars at Gotta Groove Records says, hey, we'll pay you, come out here for this. And that's how it happened. I had this whole other thing planned where I was gonna talk about my interview because it was super wild, but judging by the crowd, it seems a little inappropriate, so I'm not gonna say it. This is Jason Bokros, who's here with us tonight, back there. I'm training him to operate presses as well, him and another employee. Used vinyl gets recycled, so scrap records, what we'll do with that is we'll punch out the center hole and then throw them in a big grinder, grind them up into little pellets like that. Colored vinyl records. These are fun to make. I mean, the whole, making records is fun, period. There's a lot of creative aspects of it. Color mixing, making records by hand. It's really arty, kind of.
Talk a little bit about how you make
So what I do to make this is we'll have put material in the hopper. It'll come through, orange material in a hopper. It'll come through, make a biscuit. I'll have a hot plate in front of me with pink pellets on it, and those will heat up, and then I'll throw them on top of the biscuit, and you'll get a splatter record like that.
The edges get trimmed?
The edges get trimmed in the automation we have. So after the record gets pressed, it has all the excess flash on the side of it. A table comes forward, it drops the record on the table, takes it back, 2 pads compress it, blade comes down, trims the record completely, drops it on the stack, you have a completed record. Okay, does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
So, when Amy was talking about cutting the V, cutting the actual groove, so the needle doesn't move up and down, it moves side to side. Is that how it's picked? Oh, so it's, okay. And then does one side is like the right stereo and one side is the left, and is up and down the volume?
Up and down is actually called vertical modulation, right? And so has more to do with the energy of the audio program. So that has more to do with if you have, a lot of bass, right? That's like up and down. You might have some vertical modulation for high frequency stuff, like cymbals and stuff might make it move up and down a lot, but it's really
the speaker extend more. Is that the idea?
correct. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, nobody has any questions. Go to the final slide. Oh, wait, what?
You pump out like 3,000 records a day on a long day. Like,
Yeah.
how many are you getting orders for versus like what you're putting out?
I don't know. We're getting a lot of orders, that's for sure. We're constantly busy.
Like for the month of August, we have 42,000, not orders, but that's how many units we will produce in that month. And I think July is 32,000, something like that.
Yes.
So, mastering an album and mastering an album for vinyls are completely different processes, right?
Yeah, they are.
Is there any reason that they're called the same thing? Because that just seems really confusing.
That's another question for you.
I don't know why they're called the same. It is a little bit confusing. People are understandably confused about pre-vinyl masters or no, I got my record mastered, but it's called a vinyl master. It's really just cutting a lacquer. We should just call it cutting a lacquer. But the industry has historically called it vinyl mastering.
So basically with current technologies and the way we're seeing things, being able to visually look at stuff smaller and also produce things with different means and stuff. Do you see different advances starting to happen and advances towards the analog sound and vinyl? And
Well, there's a company in Germany and there's a company in Toronto, and they're building new record presses right now. So there's a bunch of little places popping up all over the United States that are jumping on board now with producing again. So
do you
does
think
that answer it?
yeah, do you think they're looking for new ways of getting sound out of vinyl or that kind of thing because we might be able to look at it?
I don't know. I think vinyl is a technology that burned out way too soon. I think it had its run, and then people jumped on board with CD too quickly. I still think there's a lot of life left in this industry. Honestly, I don't think it has been pushed as far as it can be pushed, and I think it's in the foreseeable future that maybe it'll be the dominating media again. I don't know. I'm hopeful that that's the direction it'll go, but yeah, I don't know. So, hope that answers your question. Yes.
Just, you have 1946 as the sort of first vinyl. Is that specific to the material? Because we have an Edison player and there were Victrolas. What's the difference?
1948 is when they actually started using the actual vinyl. Before that, they used shellac. They used shellac for years and years and years. So it got broken really easily. And then with the advent of vinyl, that's when the music industry just boom, blew up. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is there any difference in sound between different thicknesses of records?
Is there anything about, like, people are making thicker records?
If you're referencing like 180 gram records,
I don't really know.
there's no sound quality difference. I mean, the sound quality, when it comes to pressing, I can only do so much. It really matters how your record is mastered and cut, if it's done top notch or if it's done crappy. Because if it's done crappy, your record's gonna sound like crap. There's nothing I can do. If you put a lot of money into your mastering and then it comes to me, I'm gonna make you a great record. It's gonna sound wonderful. But it all depends on the mastering and the cutting itself.
So the thickness of the vinyl doesn't have any additional
Well, I mean-
benefit to the person who's cutting the record as far as giving you more to work with your, like, that triangle?
No.
Okay,
Well,
that was my question, basically.
Yeah, not the triangle so much as probably just, I mean, the vinyl holds up pretty well,
Yeah.
like better than lacquer. But if you go much thinner with it, you deal with things like warping, dishing, things like that can happen easily. We press all of our records in between like 140 and 150 gram, which makes a really nice, stable product. People are quite fond of the 180 gram format as well. 180 gram feels really cool, and I think a lot of people hope and feel that will be more stable and that it's not going to warp over time, and that's why people prefer it. But they're really, I mean, anecdotally, I don't think there's no difference, and I haven't seen any like hard research to support it. It's mostly just personal preference and aesthetic.
Okay, it's definitely not audio ability of the thicker record, it's more just like it might last longer or better.
Correct.
Feel
Yeah,
nice.
might
Okay.
have better archival purposes. Perhaps last a little bit longer. There's some people over here.
yes. Go ahead.
I was interested in what genre of music, what types of musicians are most eager to have vinyl.
Rockers. I would say. I mean, it's a lot of rockers, and the scene that I'm personally more involved with is electronic music. So I think it's split between rock and roll guys, electronic music, some hip hop turntablist guys or something. But I mean, it's all over the map, truthfully.
How many plants are there in the U.S. and are any of the majors still pressing records?
How many plants? I want to say like 15 or 16 plants in the United States. Worldwide, maybe 45, I think. Who are the majors? There's one plant in the Czech Republic right now that's just dominating the scene, and that's because they produce vinyl in-house, they do their own plating, they make their own labels. I mean, they have like a giant smokestack that employs an entire town in the Czech Republic, and it's because they have everything in-house that they're able to dominate the industry. Unlike us, we have to, we do plating across the country in New Jersey. We get labels in Florida. All of our stuff is spread all over, so it's more of a time-consuming process for us. Yeah.
So the labels are actually stamped into the record?
Yeah, it's all done with pressure, so that's all it is. It drops one side, other side, presses it so hard that it's pressed into that vinyl. No glue, no Elmer's glue needed. Yes?
Is there any difference in noise floor or sound quality with colored vinyl versus black vinyl?
There is. So with opaque colors and stuff, so glow in the dark and white tend to sound the worst. When you start, like this record probably doesn't have the highest sound quality to it just because it uses white in there. So that's the absolute worst color you can choose when it comes to sound quality. If you want the highest sound quality, just go with black.
Can you comment on what causes those differences? Do you
Just
know?
formulation.
Okay.
Formulation of the compound. All the different colors are formulated differently. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there an actual difference between virgin and reused?
Regrind? Yeah, there is. So audiophiles go for the all virgin. It's just, you know, your record's gonna come out clean sounding. The more regrind you use, the noisier it gets, because, you know, who knows how long that regrind has actually been in cycle. So I could, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, I could probably be using like regrind that we made back in June of last year still in the records, because the regrind is just constantly getting pressed, getting grinded up, back in the bucket, getting pressed again. So, I mean, if you really care about sound quality, I would go 100% virgin.
As your business keeps growing with great demand, is the vision to keep adding new presses and specialize in this particular step, or would you go like the check model and maybe add other parts of the process?
I think that's what we're shooting for right now.
To kind of spread out?
To keep, you know, the more centralized that a pressing plant can be, the better. I mean, I'm not an owner. I don't know if that's for sure, but I think
that even if we don't do it all in-house, we're looking to, I think the owners are looking to try to help bolster businesses that are interested in doing some of the stuff we don't do in-house locally. Like, we're looking at bolstering people who want to do center labels. We're looking at, you know, sending business to people who want to do jackets, printing jackets. People who would be interested locally in doing an electroforming facility or something like that. We would love to keep it, if not locally, in-state, regional, at least on this coast, so that we're not dealing with the time delays and shipping fees from far away. But also, it would be really cool if Cascade helps bring other, you know, as a domino effect, helps bring other businesses, you know, new aspects that they didn't think they'd be able to have to their businesses.
What makes it such a better choice to go for an old press, restoring it, than to create a new one?
The new presses that are kind of coming online, that's kind of like a mystery, you know, like nobody's really used them. I mean, what's on the market right now are old presses. So the new ones, I would say, are really expensive and kind of a risk, because I don't think they've fully been felt out yet. That's just my opinion, though.
I'm wondering, like, why is it so hard to make a new one if it's just basically pressure?
I can't tell you that, man.
I mean, it's really expensive to make them. They're extremely expensive, and up until recently, nobody was interested in buying new ones. So it's kind of a supply and a demand situation where just the effort to, like, you know, manufacture one or two of them as a demo or a model to sell to people or prove that they work is extremely expensive. And then it's like, oh, you know, you have to buy 50, 100, 1,000. I don't know what the price break is. You have to have enough interested parties in buying these things new to actually manufacture them in any way that would make sense to manufacture them and sell them.
Are there a lot of old ones though?
No, they're not. They're not easy to come by. And the ones at this point that you would come by are probably in various states of disrepair. We're really lucky to come by this dual press 7-inch. It's not online yet, but it will be. It's really cool. It is, all the presses we have now just press one record at a time, but this one actually has 2 automations in it. It presses 2 at one time. The automation's a lot faster. But it'll be fun to get in the 7-inch game as well. But it was really challenging to find that machine. And if we wanted to find more, it would be easy.
So based on a maintenance level for these machines, I mean, you're dealing with old machines that have antiquated parts and quite often aren't made anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How do you service these when something breaks?
Well, probably getting a machinist. What we usually do is we have repair kits to repair. A lot of times cylinders will fail, so the mechanic will take that cylinder out, completely disassemble it, get new gaskets in, put it all back together. So far, we've been pretty fortunate. We haven't had any like catastrophic failures happen to us. There was one of the machines was dropped during the unloading process when they first purchased the machines, it completely cracked, or not cracked, but bent the automation. And we were fortunate enough to find the exact automation we needed, so we kind of got rid of the old one, put the new one on. But yeah, the parts are pretty irreplaceable. There's one company out of, it's New Hampshire, right, RPA? They're somewhere on the East Coast. So they're called Record Products of America. They make very specific parts for Hamilton and SMT machines. They pretty much are the one-stop shop for everything, and they're the only ones who do it. So they're also kind of milking people because their prices are way up. Yeah.
Do you think the 3D printing will have like advent eventually to help you with those kind of things, parts and
Maybe.
Yeah, I think
That would be cool. That's a good idea. Actually, at Gotta Groove Records, so one of my problems with installing stampers is that sometimes when you're tightening down the bolts, the tool you have will slip and it'll scratch the record, rendering the stamper useless. You can't press a record with the scratch on the stamper. So they tried 3D printing to get us those tools that tighten the bolts. Didn't work. Yeah, it just completely crumbled under the pressure. So I have used a tool that was 3D printed. Go ahead.
So I noticed when you had the lathe up there, there was some of the statistics of the functions of the lathe. One of them was delay. What is the use of delay? Yeah, what is the use of the delay on there?
So the delay for the lathe is just to delay the signal to the lathe so that it doesn't, so you don't blow the cutter head, basically. You want to pad the signal so that if there's some type of audio anomaly that's going to put too much currency to that cutter head, it can only take so much. It's old equipment. You have to be really careful with it. So the delay allows for the computer inside of, for two things, to protect the cutter head, but also for the computer to basically, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, basically delay for the audio program so it knows what to expect. It's always planning for, oh boy, there's a big bass event coming up. I got to get ready to do the wide thing and then adjust the grooves that are coming after it so that everything fits, because you're already kind of how much time the audio program's going to run, and that computer has to plan for all of that, not knowing that there's all those little things in there, those nuances in the program.
Yes.
Are all the grooves uniform or do they vary as far as the width and depth throughout the record?
They vary, but we want them to be as uniform as possible. So we preset them to be between 1 and 2 mil. That being said, the computer has to allocate for events, so it's always trying to keep them from going under 1 mil and going over 2 mil. If it goes under 1 mil, when they go to plate it, the nickel won't go in such a small space, and so you risk it basically having not being able to play. So the computer's always adjusting for those things, but they're not always precisely uniform. Where's that picture of the grooves? Well, that's unmodulated. So that's an unmodulated groove. There's no program in that. It's just it cutting. Normally that looks like jagged or bow-tied. It doesn't look like that.
It sounds like the bottleneck might be in the engineering and in the lathe process. Do you have trouble getting those things done? Or are there a lot of people who do that too?
No, that's not.
There's a lot of people who do that. I think that the bottleneck is 100% pressing, because it takes about 30 to 40 seconds to make one record. So you got, let's see, like 5,000 records you need to make. That's going to take 4 days, 5 days just to get that one single job done. And then you got 50 customers who want 5,000 runs. So because the process to actually make Yeah, we got a 7-inch press that isn't online yet, but has two. You put two stampers close together at the same time. It'll press 2 7-inches in 1 42nd cycle. Drop them off front.
I mean, like the new ones that are coming out.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Are they faster?
I really don't know. I'm not sure. Go ahead.
So when you stamp, does it press both sides?
It presses both sides. B side usually goes on top. A side goes on the bottom. Yep.
What was the question you thought he was gonna ask about 3D printing?
I thought he was going to ask if people were using 3D printers to basically make records, to scribe them, to cut out the pressing, and just basically take a piece of plastic and 3D print the grooves right into it. That's what I thought he was going to
Has
ask.
anybody even tried that yet?
Oh yeah.
Has it been successful?
No.
So-
So I think
Too fine, isn't it?
yeah, they don't have it fine enough yet. Yeah, I mean, I think they would love. I think there's some folks who would really love to have like a, instead of a printer, a CD scribing 3D printer, that like a home computer printer type setup. It's really far from that happening, and it may never happen. That technology just might not be there.
So one of the things that I'm hearing, I mean, it's just really interesting in that you talk about how much you're using digital technology and the computers to master these things and control this event overall. But how did they do this in the 60s? How the heck did you figure that out?
Yeah, so so I showed you the waveform, but in the 60s it was tape. I mean, it was tape, or it was direct. Like even before the 60s, when they would record music, they were recording direct to the lathe. Like they'd have the band come in, and they were recording live sometimes right to the that was what they had to record on. In the 60s, they were probably recording all their tracks on the tape or mixing down onto tape. And then that was being fed to the lathe. Once things became computerized, just about every vinyl release since the advent of computers has, even if it started as tape, got digitized and then sent to be cut from a digital file. It's a cleaner pathway.
So it's been a format for so long. Go and using like different material to make a record out of and been even remotely successful, like instead of vinyl.
I think I might have used something.
The process is the same for like flexi discs. Those like basically.
To do that, or I think Pirates Press has a single flexi disc machine, but I assume that it's the same thing. I've never seen it. No way.
I can speak from experience that we pressed in Pirates Press.
Oh, did you come to Cascade before?
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool. Glad to see you here. Well, if nobody has any more questions, I suggest if you want to know the history. Oh, wait, someone does? Okay, go ahead.
When I was little, we had a record that seemed to have like a picture on it.
Uh-huh. So you start off with a disc with a picture on it. So like Michael Jackson's Thriller, picture him on the front, track listing on the back, and then you get a special piece of plastic laid over the top of it and laid under the bottom of it and like hand press. So you're pressing onto the plastic using, I don't think they use heat with it at all. I think it's just sheer pressing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was just curious, I don't know if you've heard this before, is there a minimum run that Cascade will do? Like if somebody wants 50 records or somebody wants, is there
Our minimum off the street is 500, but we'll do 200 to 300 records if we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What's your backlog? I've heard now since you're one of the few printers, at least in the Northwest.
What is it? else that we need? How many are waiting in line?
Yeah, how many waiting in line? So you're thinking OPD type of deal? Put an order in today, you know.
Yeah, so if you put an order in today, so I think you're talking about like a turnaround time. So a normal turnaround time would be about 14 to 16 weeks. Yeah. And that, yeah, I mean, it can take a little longer. Again, we don't control all the elements. It can take a little bit longer. Like if our vendor for electroforming gets backed up, then we don't get metal parts, and so that adds time. Or if a printing vendor is backed up, we don't have labels, we don't have print, our customers slow in ordering that stuff. Yeah. But if if things are going, linear, it's like 14, 16 weeks.
Yes, sir.
As far as metal parts, how many, sets do you typically get to run?
Every 1,000 records will change out the set of stampers. Yeah. So, order 2,000, you get 2 sets of stampers. Yep.
One more. What's your musical genre that you're heavily into right now that you're printing? Is it pretty much
Just
alternative?
hits of the Northwest, right?
Classical in there, jazz, blues?
Indie, yeah.
Indie.
Yep. Yes.
Are there machines that connect directly to a record?
They have direct metal mastering. You're always going to need to press a record, but to avoid the plating process,
I saw a really cool video of Jack White using a machine somewhere in Tennessee it's like a booth that he brought an acoustic guitar into and just recorded straight onto a record and just spat out a little 45 right back at him. That's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
In town, like here?
Yeah, TLE Living Empire has one of those machines, I think on the Popcorn store. I think it's down for repairs currently, but the goal is to have that available.
I had a question too, but
Okay, well, yeah, if you need more history on it, go out and get this book, The Art of Making Records, Mike Evans. A lot of information in there that you're not going to find in any other book that I've come across. Anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us. You can probably hang out for a couple minutes after here if you want to. Yeah.
When the machine is pressing, is there anything that you ought to be worried about, just like floating into the press and destroying plates?
So the worst possible situation that you could come across is, say a bolt comes loose from somewhere in the automation and it gets pressed into the actual mold itself. Not only are those molds finished, but to buy a new pair would be upwards of $5,000. So that's a big no-no. Worst case scenario.
Say like a bug.
A bug.
Hair.
I've pressed plenty of bugs into records. It doesn't harm the stamper. You have to polish it out. You can. I've pressed leaves into records. I've pressed dollar bills into records. I've hair into human hair into records. Just and the sound quality gets degraded, but it does work. Yeah.
At Pirates Press, the flexies, we hole punch them.
Mm-hmm.
So there'd be little hole punches that would sometimes stick to it from all the static.
Mm-hmm.
And if we weren't too careful, just a little hole punch could destroy a plate.
Whoa.
And couldn't press another flexi with it.
That's crazy. Cool.
It's just the difference in size.
When you're pressing the records and like something like a bug or a leaf gets in there, do you just toss that record or do you put it in the order and just
Throw it away. We throw away the record, polish the stampers, and continue on.
Can you recycle those discarded records?
Yeah, so we do punch out. We punch out the center hole so no paper is exposed into the regrind, and we send it in the grinder and becomes regrind.
So what the thing that you got into it is still inside the record?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen with it?
Oh, here, take a look at it. It just stays in the record. Go ahead.
Do you punch the bug out before you throw it away?
No, it goes straight in the garbage. Okay then. Yeah.
So we return on June 28th in 2 weeks with Catherine Hill, the director of Portland Hearing Voices, and her talk is called Voices and Visions. Okay, here we go. Research consistently shows us that extrasensory phenomena such as hearing voices, seeing visions, and feeling unexplained tactile sensations is a common human experience. Despite this fact, Westerners often feel that it is a rare and sometimes dangerous experience. Where do these experiences come from and what do they mean to people? Is there spiritual significance to them? How do our belief systems impact both these experiences and our perceptions of those who have them? In this talk, Kate will address these questions as well as talk about the Hearing Voices movement, a growing body of people who work to empower the people who have these experiences. This should be really fascinating. Let's have another round of applause for Dave Mendoza and Amy Dragon.